Ahoy! Today we have a variety of very different news for New World, some positive, some negative. Let's begin with the new balance of power. We had another episode of that, matching the patch that we received yesterday, and we get some extra information from that, so it's worth talking about. So what we learned in the new balance of power is that David is overall happy with the Season 1 changes. He says it's a good balance upon which they can build now. He sees a lot more diversity in builds, especially in arenas, and various builds performing well as well, especially in arenas. Same is true for expeditions, whereas wars are overall still very bruiser heavy, but new strats are coming in. On the bad side of these changes, he sees that there's a very heavy ranged meta, especially in Outpost Rush. In overall balance terms, he thinks that especially the Fire Staff and Ice Gauntlet are very strong. They are both played a lot and also have high win rates, so that indicates an overall strong weapon. The bow usage is also very high, but the win rate is actually under 50%. Melee is generally underperforming against range, but especially in Outpost Rush. Mutation clear rates are getting better again. Initially they were somewhat worse, but now people are adjusting to the new meta, so it's picking up again. I will make a mutation guide very soon, it's basically almost done. I just need to make some other stuff first, but that will help you if you are struggling with mutations on the new patch still. The next meta, or the next planned changes that we are seeing, is that there will be big balance patches every season, and they're still aiming for this monthly balance patch, so it's likely we're going to see another balance patch before we see the next season patch, which makes me very, very happy. In terms of plans changes for Season 2, they want to buff the underused and underpowered abilities of each weapon. They want to look at those and see what they can change about them to make them more interesting, to make them stronger. And what they're also planning to do in Season 2 is changes to blocking that they think look good so far, but they have to see if things are going well enough for them to actually release those in Season 2. But the plan is to do so, which I am very, very happy about. When it comes to specific weapon balance, the Fire Staff is, in David's opinion, a bit oppressive, and it also has an empower bug at the moment. That is why it received some nerfs in the most recent patch, though nothing too massive, just something to bring it more in line. The Ice Gauntlet also again sees heavy usage and has high win rates. The problem here is that David says they're not really seeing a clear issue. So what they nerfed was Entomb, the health that you get for the Entomb itself, which I think is not the main angle. But he said there's not really any smoking gun in that regard, and they're keeping an eye on Ice Gauntlet. My personal take on this, my personal suggestion here, is to look at Ice Pylon. I believe that Ice Pylon is a major factor in the Ice Gauntlet strength for various reasons. It allows you to make enemies lock onto the Ice Pylon if they're melees, because it can be targeted in that way. It forces the player's attention away from you because they have to decide, am I going to attack the Ice Pylon or am I going to attack the Ice Gauntlet user, and accept that I'm taking a lot of damage as long as he stays close to the Ice Pylon. And on top of all of that, the Ice Pylon is also active while you're using another weapon, which I think is very, very strong because not many effects do that anymore. There are some exceptions, some things that you can drop on the ground. One of them happens to be Ice Storm on the Ice Gauntlet as well. But generally, a lot of abilities are more bound to the weapon itself that you're using, whereas the Ice Gauntlet has 3 abilities that can last on the other side if you're on another weapon. And Ice Pylon is particularly strong in that regard because it lasts for a really long time and does consistent damage. The Ice Gauntlet user can be very bad, and the Ice Pylon will still hit the enemy consistently. So yeah, I think that is at least one significant factor that could be looked at. Despite statistically not performing the best, the bow sees heavy usage, which David thinks is partially due to the musket changes and partially also due to the fortify changes, which just benefit the bow. Since it's not overperforming drastically, they don't want to nerf the overall power of the weapon, but rather limit the extremes, so it maybe performs not quite as well in the hands of very experienced players, so it's a bit more level. And in that regard, the changes that they're doing are the damage changes to the fall off at long distances and the smaller hitboxes. So if you are trying to hit enemies at a very long range, it is going to be more difficult, and that's obviously going to limit the damage output, especially if you're good at aiming at long range, because even if you're good, it's going to be more difficult, and even if you hit, it's going to be less damage. For melee, David says the survivability is currently not quite making up for the mobility that Light gets in return for having lower survivability. And because of that, they're increasing the armor slightly, and they're also buffing Shirking fortification, as well as buffing other fortification armor effects on various weapons. When it comes to the musket, statistically speaking, it sees decreased usage, and the performance currently is not very good. This actually surprised me. I thought the musket would still be performing okay in the hand of skilled players. Apparently that is not the case. They are, however, taking the changes slow, because they are working on a larger rework for the musket. They don't have any ETA for that yet, they don't have any season where they can confirm that for, but that is something they're working on, so the changes for now are not going to be that massive, because there's something big happening in the background. I really, really hope that the Trapper's Tree is going to be a closer range musket combat style. That would be so cool. They buffed steady hands a little bit and also improved the reticle, which was previously not really showing how accurate the weapon was and should now reflect that better. And they are also saying that it's likely that there will be more changes in the next minor balance patch, which confirms that, again, that they're planning to do another minor balance patch before the next major patch, sticking to this monthly schedule, which is very, very cool. David also specifically said that they found a homing fix for the Void Blade, so apparently this was something that was actually in this patch, so they must have buffed it further, or the homing, the tracking itself was improved in some way, which is very cool. But you know what they say about having the good without the bad, and the bad is here in form of this post, sunsetting the forums. They're announcing that the forums will be discontinued and completely shut down and will just redirect to the Discord server that they've made. The Discord server is a relatively recent addition to the forum, a very long-standing feature essentially, and yeah, this is somewhat questionable. They want to use this in different ways. They want to use it for live voice gameplay streaming, live chat, and forum threads, and allow these different engagement forms and whatnot, which does sound nice on paper, but the forums have benefits that are very difficult to replicate on a Discord server. They said they will be cataloging all the feedback that players have left, so it's available and you can save your stuff if you've posted something that you want to save, and then they will eventually just completely scrap it. And I want to talk about this a little bit, because I think there are some upsides to that potentially, but there are also some downsides. So the first thing I heard from players about this is that this is a sign that New World is shutting down soon, which is very unlikely. I've talked about what they're doing on Amazon's side very recently. I can link that video here if you're interested in the details about that. But they are basically reinforcing their New World team, if anything. So that one, not really what I think is going to happen. Also, they're doing the same thing for Lost Ark. I've asked around a bit, and the guys on the New World Database Discord have told me that having a forum through the service provider that New World is using can be fairly expensive, especially if you're a big company like Amazon. So this is some extra cost that they probably have to consider, some extra couple thousand per month that they have to pay or not pay, depending on if they're using this or not. So it's probably mainly a financial decision. The main downside here is that you cannot search forum threads on Discord the same way you can on a forum like this. So I can't Google a forum thread on Discord, which is a big problem in my opinion, because if the search function of something is bad, like the search function of Discord, then you Google it. And if you can't Google it because it's locked behind the Discord, that's very annoying. So I think that is one of the major problems with that. Along with that, you also won't have a dev tracker, at least for now. I don't know if they can figure something out, some form of bot that can kind of show dev communication specifically. I think this would be very important. But then it would also be more difficult to filter the fluff, because obviously communication on Discord is different from a forum. You might just write some more quick messages on a Discord, even as an employee, and then people will get constant notifications for those quick messages, which they probably don't want. So it's very hard to strike a balance in that regard. On top of all of that, I think it's just annoying how Discord in general handles using multiple servers at once. I know a lot of people have their company Discords and whatnot, and maybe some messages too, and bouncing between those and then the New World Discord for information is a lot more annoying than just having the forum on a separate browser. You can kind of work around that with using Discord in your browser as well and stuff like that, but generally I think there are more convenient options. On the upside, I expect communication on the Discord to be a fair bit quicker and more efficient, because Discord is just laid out as a platform where quick communication is effective. So I'm hoping that is something that they will utilize, and if there's just smaller things, those can also get reported easier. It's less effort to just quickly post something than to always make a thread on a forum. So I think there's going to be a quicker flow in general, but it depends a lot on how AGS will or won't utilize this, if that will be better. Another thing that I generally think is not the worst thing in the world is that it kind of breaks up the structure of the forum a bit, and maybe some other people will be a bit more active instead because they use Discord more, and you see some new fresh ideas, because you can tell after a while with any platform that gets used a lot, you kind of get very repetitive, somewhat ingrained ideas by specific groups of people that just basically are on the forum to push this one idea, this one agenda, and that can sometimes kind of skew the reality of what the interest of the general player base is, and because one guy is always screaming about it, essentially, and that can be somewhat misleading, and I think it's good to occasionally break that up in one form or another. How much that will change with Discord is up in the open. They also said they're going to focus more on Reddit than before, so that may become another secondary communication platform, which may actually work better with the dev tracker as well in that regard. So we'll have to see how this goes. Generally, I don't like this shift. I would prefer the forums, but I can see some small upsides to it at least, and I can see that from a business perspective for them, it probably makes a lot of sense. But to end on some better news, we also have some new skins, and they have really listened with these. Because look at that, the Tarnished Soul skin, 15,000 marks of fortune, is what we've all been asking for. Well, a lot of us at least. The dark and gritty, more towards the realistic side, but still somewhat fantasy aesthetic, it's here. We have that type of skin now finally, and honestly, that's, I think, what almost all of us want in terms of skins for New World. We finally have what we've been asking for in that regard. And there are more. We also have the Frayed Scoundrel for 15,000, a very realistic looking skin, very time appropriate skin, well, as much as New World itself is realistic anyways, but again, the type of skin that I think a lot more people want and that a lot more interest for than those super flashy, colorful ones. Then we also have Ringleader for 18,000, which is probably my favorite of the bunch, even though I actually like all three. I also have one slightly more flashy one, but still definitely on the edgy side here. Tattered Snatcher for 15,000. Color theme here is a bit more weird. But then again, as far as I'm aware, these skins may be dyeable once we get transmog. If you want the entire set, you can get that for 46,500 tokens as a bundle. The Road-Worn Musket skin is 8,500. Same price for the Scoundrel Steel Rapier skin. Also for the Cold Grip Ice Gauntlet, and also the Nicked Escutcheon Shield. And the next two weapons also have the same price. One of them being the Remodeled Butcher Hatchet skin, and the other the Poached Mauler Warhammer skin. You can get the weapon bundle for 37,500. Lantern Lit Yurt is 20,000 marks, and so is the fairly similar looking Ring of Fire. Stumble Walk Home as a drunk walk for 6,000 marks. Pretty cool, pretty fun. Hip Twist is a new dance for the same price. And Point in Love is 5,000 marks. No shocker here, they're now also selling boosters through the shop. All of these are 5 boosters for 5,000. I realistically don't think that any of these are worth buying, unless you just want to speedrun things for no reason, or you just have very limited time to play the game and a lot of money on your hands. And of course you have your die packs for 3,000 marks, but realistically there are so many free dies you can get with the new events that I don't see much of a reason to buy dies at all right now. So while we overall have a lot of good and bad news, we have more to talk about because Shirking fortification got changed and no one knows what to do again. So later today, hopefully, I will finish the video about that and we'll discuss how effective Shirking fortification now is, especially compared to elemental or also somewhat to physical aversion. And then we'll dig deeper into the springtime event as well and how to make that a bit more efficient for yourself. If you're interested in those topics, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. And if you'd like to support me further, you can do so on Patreon. Thanks to my patrons who already do that. And thank you for watching. SLOTH, out.